Oh, hello, excuse me, and welcome back to the Cambridge Data Science channel and a challenge. I'm getting ready to do a run a fact check on a headline for Washington Post, and let's take a look at the headline right now. I will mention first of all that the data I'm using for this report is from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. The data is a weekly total data set, which means that each day only holds the total deaths and cases for that day. The second way it's tracked, we'll actually see example of this here, is cumulative totals. Okay, so that yesterday's totals are added into today's totals, and today's totals. So what should be obvious from that statement, add, is that a cumulative total can never go down. The most it can do is flatten. Remember the expression flatten the curve back in April? That's all it can do. Okay? And that's all I'm going to say at this point. Once again, while you see the actual reports, you understand exactly what. So now let's take a look at the actual article. This is the Washington Post. This is published yesterday, I believe, actually. Excuse me. Yes, it's published actually today at 12:09 a.m., which is kind of an odd time. But what I want to look at here is the main headline: Pence and Harris clash under a shadow of a surging pandemic. Well, first of all, surging pandemic is basically a meaningless term without backed up with data, complete data. It's a meaningless term. Okay, but what I want to say to you is the pandemic is not surging. It is actually declining in many cases. Okay? Let's see if we can find a quote down here. Okay, I'm looking for one particular line here. I'm looking for a paragraph that talks about, here we go. The level of infection in Utah, where the debate was held, has been running at twice the national average. Now, of course, what does infection rate mean? Okay, does infection rate mean cases? I only deal with cases and deaths, because those are the only two things you can actually measure. As a matter of fact, you can't really measure cases because how many people never go to the doctor? But you can measure deaths. So does this mean that the mortality rate is twice as high as the national average? Does that mean that the average number of cases per day is twice as high as the national average? No. Now down to the numbers we're really concerned with. The virus has killed more than 211,000 Americans and sickened more than 7.5 million. That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. But the trouble is, well, the trouble is, you'll see what the trouble is once we get to the plots. Okay, so that's really all I'm going to say right now about this particular thing. Let's come back over here now. Let's come back to our data. I'm using a programming language called R program, R language, and I'm using a couple of libraries to generate the plots. Okay, but beyond that, there is no smoke and mirrors in here. A sixth grader could understand this code probably better than me. All the data I'm using the straight data. The most complicated thing I do with the data is I calculate weekly and monthly totals. That's the most complicated thing I do with the data. Okay. So now let's run our first report here. Let's pull some data. Okay, so this top line is about cases. So we see that the average number of cases in the U.S. is 26,677, and the maximum is 78,427. The average number of deaths is 784. Now that's actually a little low because you have all these zeros from January 1st forward. Okay, it's actually closer to about maybe 900. Okay, the maximum of deaths for a single is 4,928. So now let's calculate the cumulative. Remember I mentioned two different types of plots, cumulative and daily. Now we're going to see the cumulative plots. And you'll probably recognize this type of plot immediately. So remember, in a cumulative plot, where that line, so for the purposes of this, the cumulative plot for April 1st would be you take all the numbers from the first case and add them up to April 1st, and that'll give you the cumulative number for April. If we come up here to July again, that's going to be the cumulative total cases from January, okay, up to July, and so forth. So it should be obvious that this number can never go down. It can flatten. Remember that expression back in April? Flatten the curve. The only thing this to do is to flatten. So you look at this and say, well, look, cases are surging. No, cases are not surging. The purpose of this plot here is not to tell you what the data is actually doing on a day-to-day basis. Let's take a look at deaths. Again, nothing new. A little different shape, but the rules are all the same. And yes, we're above 211,000. But the question is, well, so again, this doesn't really tell us what we need to know. Okay, we need to know what is going on a day-to-day basis. We need to know whether or not the cases are increasing or decreasing, and whether deaths are increasing or decreasing on a daily, a weekly, and a monthly basis. Okay, so let's take a look at the daily numbers. Okay, now you know what? I'm actually going to take this. I'll leave it here for right now. But you just get the point. Remember that big spike back in April? Yes, we had a surge in the spike here, but then it fell down and then it's back up. So yes, you could say that cases are surging, but they're also going up and down. There's actually fluctuation. This is 65,000, and this is 40,000. That's a difference of 20 to 25,000 cases between the biggest spike here and where we're at now. Okay. But we also have to come to the reality is this number may never really go down to zero. That's just food for thought. Now let's look at deaths. Look at the deaths back in April when the case spike was half as much as it is now, and now look at the deaths. When we have we have twice as many cases. Okay, right over here, but we have half as many deaths. Okay, we had half as many cases over here, but twice as many deaths. You know, the cases have been declining overall since late July. I'm sorry, since May. Okay? Look at this decline from here to here. All right? Now let's look at the mortality rate. The mortality rate is, according to Wikipedia and John Hopkins, is simply where you divide the deaths by the total number of cases. Now there's always an error in here because we don't actually know, or I should say, divided by the total number of reported / confirmed cases. Okay. You know, deaths may be more accurate than cases simply because we know how many people are dying. So here we go. This is 2.5. This is 5%. This red line represents the average mortality, the average daily mortality rate. Look at all these days when the mortality rate was less than the average. 2.5, maybe 3.5. Okay? But look how many of these were below the average. Okay? Now let's take a look at weekly numbers. Once again, you can see, yes, we had this huge spike in cases in July, but then it began to fall back down. These numbers here are still below here. Everything from here down is below this major spike here. Okay? Some volatility isn't really the issue. Although to a certain extent, cases are falling. Now, I'll say that most of these cases here are above the average number of cases per week. Once again, let's take a look at deaths. Look at the deaths back in April as compared once again to the cases back in April. Look at the deaths between July and October. Look at this here. Look at this weekly decline. And even these over here are below the average number of weekly deaths for the U.S. So the pattern's clear. Okay, the pattern's clear. The steps we are making, the sacrifices we as Americans are making, is working. And that's really my message to you today. The situation is getting improved. The pandemic rate, the number of deaths and cases is not surging. Okay? In actual fact, it is declining. And it has been declining for several weeks. Let's take a look at the monthly totals just to verify that. Once again, look, the monthly cases are twice as high as in April and May. Okay? But even these numbers, the August-September numbers, monthly number of cases has declined. What about deaths? Once again, look at this here. Yes, it spiked up here to about 30,000 deaths in August. But look at September. Okay? Cases, not very high. Deaths, spike in cases began in July, but the deaths remain low. I'm going to say it again. We are winning this battle. It's going to be a long battle. It's going to be a long battle. But we will eventually conquer this disease. Cases will drop even more dramatically. Deaths will drop even more dramatically. Now, another caveat is maybe never to zero. Maybe never to zero. But they will continue to fall. Okay? So that takes care of my Washington Post fact check for today. Like I say, they're not blatantly lying. They're just not giving the American people all the data like I am. All the data like I am to prove that it's not surging anymore. Okay. But anyway, I also want to encourage you to do your own homework. Okay. Do your own homework. There are several reliable sources of COVID-19 data with cases and deaths on the internet. John Hopkins has a nice one. I think it's called worldmeter.net.com. Has a nice set. Washington University has a real nice interface to their data. So, turn off the news when they start to talk about any news. Okay, I don't care which news it is, liberal, conservative. Turn off all the news when it comes to COVID-19 and go to these websites and follow me, find out what the numbers are really doing. Okay? Thanks so much again for your time. And hey, keep at it. Keep working. We will get through this disease eventually. Probably even sooner than later. So thanks again so much for your time. We'll catch you on the next analysis.